The SS sentry hears something behind him. He turns. Nancy is already moving. One hand flat, one strike. The judo chop catches him across the throat exactly where the instructors in England told her it would work. He drops without making a sound. Nancy drags the body into the shadows and keeps moving. The raid on the Gestapo headquarters is just beginning. This is France in 1944. Nancy Wake is the most wanted person in the country. 5 million francs on her head, and tonight she is walking straight into the building where the men hunting her work every single day. Nancy Grace Augusta Wake is born on August 30th, 1912, in Roseneath, Wellington, New Zealand. She is the youngest of 6 children. Her family is part Maori through her great-grandmother Purewa, believed to be of the Ngati Mahanga Iwi. In 1914, when Nancy is 2 years old, her family moves to Australia and settles in North Sydney. Shortly after the move, her father Charles Augustus Wake returns to New Zealand. He never comes back. Nancy's mother Ella raises the 6 children alone. Nancy grows up rebellious. At 16 years old, she runs away from home. She works as a nurse for a while, then inherits 200 pounds from an aunt. Most girls her age would save it. Nancy uses it to buy a ticket to New York City. From New York, she goes to London. She trains herself as a journalist. By the 1930s, she is working in Paris as a European correspondent for Hearst newspapers. She is young, ambitious, and fearless. She travels across Europe covering stories that most male journalists avoid. In 1935, Nancy is assigned to cover the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi movement. She travels to Berlin and Vienna. What she sees there changes her forever. She witnesses roving Nazi gangs randomly beating Jewish men and women in the streets of Vienna. She watches as Jewish shop windows are smashed. She sees people dragged from their homes. The brutality is open, public, casual. Nancy writes about it. But writing is not enough. She makes a promise to herself that day. If she ever gets the chance to fight the Nazis, she will take it. In 1937, Nancy meets Henri Edmond Fioca, a wealthy French industrialist. He is older than her, successful, and deeply in love with her. They marry on November 30th, 1939. Nancy is 27 years old. She settles into life as a wealthy French socialite in Marseille. She has money, status, and freedom. She throws parties. She drinks champagne. She wears expensive dresses and flirts with everyone. The German officers who will later hunt her across France have no idea that the glamorous woman at the party is memorizing their faces. When Germany invades France in May 1940, Nancy is living in Marseille. The French military collapses in weeks. The government signs an armistice with Germany. France is divided. The north and west are occupied by German forces. The south becomes Vichy France, a puppet state that cooperates with the Germans. Nancy's promise to herself in Vienna suddenly has an outlet. She does not wait for someone to ask. She volunteers. First, she serves as an ambulance driver during the chaos of the invasion. Then she hears about an escape network run by Captain Ian Garrow, a Scottish officer who stayed behind when the British evacuated. The network helps Allied airmen who have been shot down over France escape to neutral Spain. It also helps Jewish refugees flee the Nazis. Nancy and her husband Henri both join. The network becomes known as the Pat O'Leary Line, named after the alias of its leader Albert Guerris. Nancy becomes a courier. Her job is to move people, downed airmen, Jewish families, resistance fighters who are being hunted. She uses her status as a wealthy socialite as cover. The Germans see a glamorous French woman who speaks perfect English and seems completely harmless. They do not see the forged documents hidden in her handbag. They do not see the money she is carrying to safe houses. They do not see the lists of names she has memorized. Nancy describes her tactics years later. A little powder and a little drink on the way, and I would pass their posts and wink and say, "Do you want to search me?" God, what a flirtatious little bastard I was. The network is incredibly successful. Between 1940 and 1943, Nancy and the Pat O'Leary Line help over 1,000 Allied servicemen and countless refugees escape to Spain. But success brings attention. The Gestapo knows someone is running an escape network in southern France. They tap Nancy's phone. They intercept her mail. They follow her. Nancy knows they are watching, so she becomes more careful. She changes her routes. She varies her schedule. She never uses the same safe house twice in a row. The Gestapo gives her a nickname, the White Mouse, because no matter how close they get, she always slips away. By 1943, the Gestapo has placed a price on her head, 5 million francs. It is the highest bounty placed on any Allied agent in France. Nancy Wake is now the most wanted person in the country. In November 1942, everything changes. The Allies launch Operation Torch, the invasion of North Africa. In response, Germany occupies Vichy, France. Now there are no safe zones. The Gestapo has unrestricted access to the entire country. The Pat O'Leary line is betrayed. Someone talks. The Gestapo begins rounding up members of the network. Nancy knows she has to run. Her husband Henri refuses to leave. He wants to stay and continue the fight. Nancy argues with him, but Henri will not change his mind. She kisses him goodbye and leaves Marseille. She does not know it yet, but she will never see him again. Nancy heads for the Spanish border. The Pyrenees Mountains are the only way out. But before she can reach them, she is arrested in Toulouse. The Gestapo picks her up with a trainload of other suspects. She is interrogated for 4 days. The Gestapo officers ask her questions. They show her photographs. They accuse her of working for the resistance. Nancy denies everything. She plays the role of a wealthy socialite who has no idea what they are talking about. She flirts, she cries, she acts confused. On the 4th day, Albert Guéris, the head of the Pat O'Leary line, makes a move that saves her life. He contacts the Gestapo and claims that Nancy is his mistress. He says she was traveling to meet him and is trying to conceal her infidelity to her husband. All of it is a lie, but it works. The Gestapo releases her. Nancy immediately heads for the mountains. She crosses the Pyrenees on foot in the middle of winter. The journey is brutal. Freezing temperatures, snow, steep climbs, but she makes it to Spain. From Spain, she travels to Gibraltar, then to England. She arrives in London in June 1943. Nancy does not rest. She goes straight to the headquarters of the Special Operations Executive, the SOE. She volunteers immediately. The SOE is a secret organization created by Winston Churchill to conduct espionage, sabotage, and reconnaissance in occupied Europe. They are looking for agents who can parachute into France and organize the resistance in preparation for the Allied invasion. Nancy is exactly what they need. Vera Atkins, the senior female officer in the SOE, interviews Nancy. Years later, Atkins describes her as a real Australian bombshell. Tremendous vitality, flashing eyes. Everything she did well. Nancy is accepted into the SOE and sent to training. Nancy Wake is 21 years old when she begins SOE training. The program is brutal. Weapons training, explosives, hand-to-hand combat, parachute jumps, fieldcraft, survival, radio operation, interrogation resistance. The instructors push every trainee to their breaking point. Some recruits quit, some are dismissed. Nancy excels. Training reports describe her as a very good and fast shot with excellent fieldcraft. One instructor writes that she puts the men to shame by her cheerful spirit and strength of character. One technique stays with Nancy more than any other. The judo chop. The instructors teach the agents how to kill a sentry silently using the flat of the hand. The strike targets the throat or the side of the neck. Done correctly, it crushes the windpipe or severs the carotid artery. Death is almost instant. Nancy practices the move over and over. She never thinks she will actually use it. But she practices anyway. By April 1944, Nancy is ready. She is assigned to a 3-person SOE team codenamed Freelance. The team leader is Captain John Hind Farmer, codename Hubert. The radio operator is Dennis Rake, an experienced agent. Nancy is given the codename Hélène and the alias Madame André. The mission is to parachute into the Auvergne region of central France and liaise between the SOE and the local Maquis resistance groups. The Maquis are guerrilla fighters, mostly young men hiding in the forests and mountains to avoid being sent to forced labor camps in Germany. They are brave but disorganized. They lack weapons, training, and leadership. That is where Nancy comes in. Let us know in the comments where you are watching this from. Are you in the United States, Germany, the United Kingdom, or somewhere else? We would love to know who is keeping these stories alive, because what Nancy Wake does next is going to make the Gestapo realize they should have tried harder to catch the White Mouse. On the night of April 29th to 30th, 1944, Nancy Wake sits in the back of a Royal Air Force bomber flying over occupied France. She is wearing a jumpsuit, a parachute, and a pistol. She has 5 million francs on her head. If she is captured, the Gestapo will torture her and then execute her. She knows this. She jumps anyway. The parachute opens. Nancy descends through the darkness. Below her, she can see lights. Resistance fighters are waiting for her, but the wind pushes her off course. She crashes into a tree. Her parachute tangles in the branches. She is stuck, hanging several feet off the ground. A man runs toward her. His name is Henri Tardivat, one of the local Maquis leaders. He looks up at Nancy and says, "I hope that all the trees in France bear such beautiful fruit this year." Nancy does not miss a beat. "Cut out that bullshit and get me out of this tree." Tardivat laughs and cuts her down. It is the beginning of a friendship that will last for months of brutal combat. The freelance team is taken to meet Émile Couloudon, codename Gaspard. He is the overall leader of the Maquis groups in the Auvergne region. Gaspard is suspicious at first. He wants money and weapons from the Allies, but he does not want to take orders from London. The relationship is frosty until the French Forces of the Interior, the umbrella organization for all resistance groups, instructs him to cooperate. After that, the SOE begins sending in large amounts of arms, equipment, and money. Nancy's duties are clear. She identifies drop zones where the RAF can parachute in supplies. She collects the supplies when they arrive. She distributes weapons, ammunition, explosives, and money to the Maquis groups. She also carries a target list. Before the Allied invasion of France, the resistance is supposed to destroy specific communication lines, railway bridges, and German installations. Nancy coordinates all of it. She works 18-hour days. She never complains. The Maquis fighters, who initially dismiss her as just another woman, quickly learn to respect her. She can outdrink most of them. She can outshoot many of them. And she is not afraid of anything. By May 1944, Gaspard has mobilized roughly 7,000 resistance fighters divided into 3 groups. His plan is ambitious. He wants to demonstrate that the resistance can liberate areas from the Germans using its own forces. He establishes a base at Montmouchet, a plateau in the Massif Central. The Maquis dig in and wait. On June 2nd, the Germans launch a probing attack. The Maquis fight back and hold their positions. On June 10th, the Germans return with a larger force. The fighting is brutal. The Maquis are outnumbered and outgunned. On June 20th, the Germans encircle the plateau. The Maquis are forced to retreat. They take heavy casualties. Nancy and the freelance team accompany groups of Maquis in a 3-day retreat covering 150 kilometers westward to the village of Saint-Santin. During the retreat, disaster strikes. Dennis Rake, the radio operator, leaves his radio and codes behind. Without the codes, the freelance team cannot communicate with London. The nearest SOE radio and operator are in Châteauroux, over 200 kilometers away. Nancy does not hesitate. She borrows a bicycle and starts riding. Nancy rides through the night. She passes through German checkpoints by playing the same role she used in Marseille. She smiles. She flirts. She acts like a local woman traveling to visit family. The German soldiers wave her through. She rides for 72 hours straight, 500 kilometers, through enemy-occupied territory, with no backup, no weapons except a small pistol. If she is stopped and searched, if her cover story fails, she will be arrested, tortured, and executed. She reaches Châteauroux, finds the radio operator, and sends a situation report to London. Then she gets back on the bicycle and rides 500 kilometers back to Saint-Santin. When she arrives, the Maquis fighters stare at her in disbelief. She has been gone for 3 days, her legs are cramping, her hands are blistered. But the radio link with London is restored. Supply drops can resume. The resistance can keep fighting. Years later, when someone asks Nancy about the bicycle ride, she shrugs. The worst part was that I got a very sore behind. If you are enjoying this story and want more untold accounts from World War II, make sure to subscribe to the channel. we are bringing you stories that most history books never covered. Now let us talk about the moment Nancy Wake used that judo chop she learned in training. After the bicycle ride, the freelance team regroups and joins the Maquis group led by Henri Tardiva. In July, 2 American instructors arrive, Reeve Schley and John de Koven Alsop. Neither speaks much French, and Schley is nearly blind without his thick eyeglasses, but they are effective instructors. The Maquis fighters learn how to use the weapons being dropped by the RAF. Nancy and Tardivat initiate a series of attacks on German convoys. The Germans respond by sending troops to hunt the resistance. Several firefights break out. 7 French Maquis fighters are killed defending their camp. Nancy's principal job continues to be organizing supply drops. Nearly every other night, RAF planes fly over and parachute in weapons, ammunition, explosives, and money. But Nancy is not content to stay in the background. She participates in combat missions. She leads ambushes. She plants explosives. And one night she kills a man with her bare hands. The details of the mission are unclear. Nancy never specifies the exact date or location, but the story is consistent every time she tells it. The Maquis are planning a raid on a German position. Nancy volunteers to go with them. They move through the darkness toward the target. Nancy is in the lead. She rounds a corner and comes face to face with an SS sentry. He is standing guard. If he raises the alarm, the entire mission will fail. The Maquis fighters behind Nancy will be killed or captured. Nancy does not think. She moves, one hand flat, one strike. The judo chop catches the sentry across the throat. He drops without making a sound. Nancy drags the body into the shadows. The raid continues. Decades later, during a 1990s television interview, someone asks Nancy what happened to the sentry who spotted her. Nancy draws her finger across her throat and says, "They taught this judo chop stuff with the flat of the hand at SOE, and I practiced away at it. But this was the only time I used it. Whack! And it killed him all right. I was really surprised." Nancy also claims to have participated in a raid on the Gestapo headquarters in Montluçon, a town in central France. The raid is not confirmed by other sources, but Nancy insists it happened. According to her account, the Maquis stormed the building in June 1944. 38 Germans were killed, including Gestapo officers. The headquarters was destroyed. For Nancy, it is personal. These are the men who hunted her across France. These are the men who tortured and killed her husband, Henri. She shows no remorse. At another point, Nancy discovers that some of the Maquis fighters are using 3 girls as prostitutes and mistreating them. Nancy confronts the men and forces them to release the women. She gives the girls a wash and new clothes. 2 of the girls are sent away safely, but Nancy suspects the 3rd girl is a German spy. She interrogates her. The girl breaks and confesses. Nancy orders the resistance group to execute her. The men hesitate. They do not want to kill a woman in cold blood. Nancy insists. If they will not do it, she will. The men finally agree. According to Nancy's account, the spy girl strips naked and spits at Nancy before facing the firing squad. Nancy shows no regret. Years later, she says, "She was a German spy. She would have gotten us all killed. I have no remorse." Let us talk about what Nancy Wake and the Maquis accomplished between April and September 1944. 7,000 resistance fighters organized and coordinated, over 1,000 supply drops arranged and distributed, dozens of German convoys ambushed, railway lines destroyed, communication cables cut, bridges blown, German troops pinned down and unable to reinforce Normandy after D-Day. At one point, the Germans send 22,000 troops to destroy Nancy Wake and her Maquis fighters. The result is devastating. Nancy's forces inflict approximately 1,400 casualties on the Germans, while losing only 100 resistance fighters, a casualty rate of 14-1. Nancy Wake is personally responsible for coordinating all of it. She also participates in combat. She kills an SS sentry with her bare hands. She possibly participates in a raid that kills 38 Gestapo officers. She orders the execution of a German spy. She cycles 500 kilometers in 72 hours to save the radio link with London. She survives multiple German attacks on Maquis camps. And through it all, the Gestapo never catches her. The White Mouse stays free. Nancy's decorations reflect her contributions. The George Medal from the United Kingdom. The Medal of Freedom from the United States, one of only 987 issued with bronze palm during World War II. The Médaille de la Résistance from France. The Croix de Guerre 3 times with 2 palms and a star. The Légion d'honneur, first as Chevalier in 1970, then promoted to officer in 1988. The Companion of the Order of Australia. The Royal New Zealand Returned and Services Association badge in gold. Nancy Wake is one of the most decorated women of World War II. But all of it comes at a cost. Because in August 1943, while Nancy was training in England, the Gestapo finally caught her husband, Henri Fiocca. They tortured him for days. They wanted to know where Nancy was. They wanted names, contacts, safe houses. Henri gave them nothing. The Gestapo killed him. Nancy does not learn about his death until the war is over. On August 15, 1944, American forces invade southern France. The German occupation begins to collapse. The resistance groups, including Nancy's Maquis fighters, harass the retreating Germans. Nancy's friend Henri Tardivat is badly wounded. He loses a leg to amputation. In September, the freelance team's mission is complete. Nancy and the other SOE agents return to Great Britain. During a victory celebration in Vichy, Nancy learns the truth about her husband. Henri is dead. The Gestapo tortured and killed him in August 1943. Nancy blames herself. If she had not joined the resistance, Henri would still be alive. If she had convinced him to flee with her, he would have survived. The guilt stays with her for the rest of her life. After the war, Nancy tries to move on. She works for the intelligence department at the British Air Ministry. She moves back to Australia and enters politics. She runs for parliament 3 times and loses each time. In 1957, she marries an RAF officer named John Forward. They move to Australia in the early 1960s, but Nancy never stops thinking about Henri. Decades later, she still refers to him as the love of her life. In 1985, Nancy publishes her autobiography, The White Mouse. She writes about the escape network, the SOE training, the parachute drop, the bicycle ride, the judo chop, the raids, the executions. She does not apologize for any of it. She does not soften the violence or the moral compromises. She just tells the truth. John Forward dies in August 1997 after 40 years of marriage. Nancy is left alone. She sells her medals to fund herself. When asked why, she says there was no point in keeping them. I will probably go to hell and they would melt anyway. In 2001, Nancy leaves Australia for the last time and moves to London. She becomes a resident at the Stafford Hotel in Piccadilly, a former British and American Forces club during the war. She spends her mornings in the hotel bar, sipping gin and tonic and telling war stories to anyone who will listen. In 2003, Nancy moves to the Royal Star and Garter Home for Disabled Ex-Servicemen and Women in Richmond, London. She stays there for the rest of her life. On August 7, 2011, Nancy Wake dies at Kingston Hospital after being admitted with a chest infection. She is 98 years old. Before her death, Nancy makes one final request. She wants her ashes scattered in France, near Montluçon, near the place where she fought the Gestapo. On March 11, 2013, her ashes are scattered near the village of Vernex, close to Montluçon in central France. The White Mouse finally comes home. Nancy Wake's legacy is complicated. Many of the stories she told about her wartime exploits cannot be verified by other sources. The raid on the Gestapo headquarters in Montluçon, the exact circumstances of killing the SS sentry, the execution of the German spy. Some historians question whether all of these events happened exactly as Nancy described them, but the core facts are undeniable. Nancy Wake helped over 1,000 Allied servicemen and Jewish refugees escape occupied France. She parachuted back into France as an SOE agent. She coordinated 7,000 resistance fighters. She cycled 500 kilometers to save the radio link with London. She survived the war while carrying a 5 million franc bounty on her head. The official historian of the SOE, M.R.D. Foote, described Nancy as having irrepressible, infectious, high spirits that were a joy to everyone who worked with her. A fellow resistance fighter said she was the most feminine woman I know until the fighting starts. Then she is like 5 men. Nancy Wake did not ask permission to fight. She did not wait for someone to tell her what to do. She saw injustice in Vienna in 1935 and promised herself she would fight it. When the war came, she kept that promise. She fought with everything she had. She lied. She seduced. She killed. She cycled until her body gave out. She led men into battle. And she never quit. Not when the Gestapo was hunting her. Not when her husband was tortured and killed. Not when the Germans sent 22,000 troops to destroy her. She just kept fighting. The Gestapo called her the White Mouse because she was impossible to catch. But the nickname does not do her justice. Nancy Wake was not a mouse. She was a force of nature, and the Gestapo learned that too late.